SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated released over 5 years ago at this point, which is absolutely crazy to think about. This remake was very infamously rushed. Many people claim this was to coincide with the SpongeBob movie they were releasing that same year, but apparently people today claim this to be simply untrue. Perhaps Nickelodeon was still the cause. Maybe it was THQ Nordic. Maybe it was a combination of the two. Maybe there was pressure to release this game during the summer, as it was the perfect summer game for 2020. I couldn't even imagine a reality where this game released in November or something. I probably wouldn't even have played it because I would have been quite busy around the time, which is crazy to think about. Because this game was rushed, the pre-release versions are essentially betas. They were absolutely never meant to be seen by us. The assumption here, of course, is that everyone who would buy the physical copy of the game would just patch it immediately upon receiving it. If you have a digital version of the game, you're only going to have the latest patch. There's no way to revert once you update, except for PC, because Steam is pretty epic, because if you buy a game on Steam, you can access the older revisions of it. And because of this, the 1.0 version of the game can be downloaded through the Steam Depot. Let's take a look, shall we? Rehydrate revision 600294, aka PC 1.0. When you start the game, one of the first things you'll notice is that the control mapping is just awful. The buttons are all over the place, and everything is quite cumbersome to handle. This applies to both controller and keyboard and mouse. And speaking of keyboard and mouse, this revision does not have the mouse cursor available in the menu, so you can't just immediately click a location and warp there. Bad default controller mappings on a Steam game aren't the end of the world because you can remap them very easily, but you can't really say the same about keyboard and mouse, unfortunately. But anyway, also here, at the very beginning of the game, you'll notice something different in SpongeBob's house. First of all, the lighting is quite a bit different. They decide that it was a bit too dreary and they fixed it later on. But you'll notice something even bigger. SpongeBob's closet here. It costs 70 shiny objects to open. What? So unlike the original game, and unlike Rehydrated, the closet spatula costs 70 shiny objects rather than 50, meaning for some reason, they wanted to force the player to enter the library. Ironically, you can still instantly warp out of the pineapple in every single revision. It was probably some feeble attempt of padding, and it's kinda lame. Let's go to Jellyfish Fields, and in particular, the cave section. It looks entirely different. It has a color palette that resembles the original far more, though ultimately, I do think the final one looks nicer. Now, PC 1.0 is super jank. It's like really jank, but a lot of the jank could be useful for speedruns, right? Mostly. There is one big caveat, and that is the amount of shiny objects that tikis give you. Oh my god. This is the absolute one thing that really prevents this patch from being useful at all for speedruns. Every tiki, except for the floating tiki, only give you a whopping 2 shiny objects. The floating tiki gives you 5. Ooh. Honestly, I'm glad this revision is not useful for speedruns because it's so crusty and the key bindings are awful. Pressing enter to go to the menu? What? Though at the same time, it's a little bit sad because you can do the majority of the pause spatula animation skips for free. It's not frame perfect here. You can literally just warp somewhere, back out of the menu, and grab the spatula. Man, if only they didn't fix this. I honestly think people's times overall would be way better. But now that we're on the topic of the menu, this menu is completely broken. Yeah, you can warp somewhere and then literally back out of the menu, but there's more than that. So Rehydrate is quite infamous for a specific major glitch, and this glitch is called the taxi glitch. It lets you warp to any stage regardless of where you are in the game, though it's a little bit tricky because it requires 2 buttons to be pressed on the same frame. This patch has an even more broken taxi glitch. We refer to this as OP taxi glitch. Not only are frame perfect inputs not required at all, but you can warp to any spatula you want, not just any level. Because of this, we can beat the game with only 1 spatula. This truly feels like the game was just built with a level select feature. It's kind of ridiculous. Basically, you warp somewhere and then you back out of the menu, open up the menu again, and then hover over the spatula you want to warp to, and then back out of the menu again. And you will end up at the spatula you were hovering over. It's hilariously beautiful. Now that we're still on the topic of the map menu, look at SpongeBob's dream real quick. See that image? All the floating characters are T-posing. This is not normal. However, this is only an issue in the screenshot. If you go to the level itself, they're in their actual poses. The screenshot was corrected in the actual version of the game. And now we're still on the topic of screenshots. Remember SpongeBob's closet? Let's take a look at that again. The SpongeBob font and 50. Huh. We'll get back to this later. Level collectibles like the wheels in Downtown or the paintings in Rock Bottom don't have bubbles around them. They have glows. And so do the spatulas. Honestly, I do kind of prefer this as it feels a lot more like the original, but there may be some bias there. I think they definitely could have implemented the glows better. The original game, they look great. Here, they're kind of but the bubbles don't feel right to me. But moving on, there is a very easy out of bounds trick in Rehydrate. Literally just jump on this rocket and jump off, and now you're out of bounds. However, in this version of the game, it doesn't work for some reason. Yeah, they literally ended up adding a glitch later. Actually incredible. Now, there's kind of an obvious reason as to why this happened. They seem to have entirely reworked Hans. The original Hans was far more scuffed, and you can still easily utilize it to go out of bounds by using the bowling ability. Just bowl until the hand grabs you, and then keep holding forward and jump, and now you're out of bounds. Note that this is a good Hans trigger. A lot of the Hans triggers, especially the ones in the later levels, just reload the game. Something that's very easy to notice is that the dialogue sections are quite unfinished. The dialogue sections in this patch have a lot of incorrect animations, and there are a lot of weird camera angles for them. Let's warp to the 5th spatula in Rock Bottom. It plays the slide music the entire time. Very bizarre. Definitely a mistake. It doesn't fix itself after a death. And now, this one is very cool to me. While playing as Patrick in Kelp Forest, turn around, take a nice walk to the beginning of the level, and now leave the level through the taxi pad. You'll remain as Patrick in Bikini Bottom. It is very, very surreal to me to see any other character besides SpongeBob playable in Bikini Bottom. If you try to talk to any of the NPCs, it won't work, and double Patrick. Notice how the lighting is quite different. The sock trading Patrick has baked-in lighting. Abdomen. But what if I told you that this is not the 1.0 version? Notice how I've been saying PC 1.0. The reason for that is that every single platform has their own unique 1.0 version. So now you may be wondering what the earliest 1.0 version is. I'm gonna have to think about that. Just kidding. It is without a doubt the Switch version. Trust me, just wait for it. This version is hilarious. It's really bad. Now, most of PC 1.0's blemishes still apply here, but with bonuses. And you're gonna like the bonuses. Now, I've been very curious about this build for a long time. So I finally went out and bought the game. Let's test it out, shall we? Oh, it runs like total shit. We're gonna have to overclock this thing. There we are. So right off the bat, in the title screen, you'll notice a very significant difference. The SpongeBob font. Oh my god. If you've seen the beta footage of the game online, you probably noticed the SpongeBob font being used. And believe it or not, it actually made it into a released build of the game. This is the only build of the game we can access that still has the font in place. The way it was implemented could have been improved, but the fact that this was scrapped really saddens me. What they replaced it with has just no personality, man. But I kinda get it. To be fair, it does kinda fit better with the modern SpongeBob aesthetic, but I can't say I like it. And now we're in SpongeBob's house, and look at that. So, unlike PC 1.0, the door in SpongeBob's house costs 50 shiny objects like normal. This means this is how it was always supposed to be. And then they changed it. And then they changed it back. Very weird. I'm very curious about whatever conversations they had that even led to the decision being implemented and then being reverted like instantly. But I'm not going to complain because the door should be 50. Also, you may have noticed the prompt for the door. It says you only have to pay 50. Despite the door saying 70. So, which is telling the truth? The prompt is a lie. You need 70. I would love to know how any of this happened, but unfortunately, we'll probably never get that answer. The library floors and the door, they're quite unfinished and look weird. You may be wondering if the map menu is still as broken as PC 1.0, and yep, it is the exact same map menu, or debug level select, whatever you want to call it. Let's leave the pineapple. After leaving the pineapple, there is something weird about the music. The music doesn't stop during the load. While this may sound good on the surface, it's kinda awkward because once you load into the next area, the next song immediately starts playing. It's very jarring and ultimately not better. But now let's take a trip to Jellyfish Fields. Are you fucking kidding me? Alright, well, let's just play a little bit, you know? Maybe grabbing a spatula will cheer me up. Yeah, that sound is actually kind of hilarious because it's just so wimpy. And speaking of the sound design, many sound effects just don't even play at all. And there's also a lot of missing dialogue lines. Grab health, he says nothing. Get hit, he says nothing. Let's go to downtown. And let's switch. Whoa, 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 whoa. What is that? This is a totally different bus stop model. And if you're familiar with the original game, it is heavily based on that bus stop model. The bus stop texture on it is very poor, though this potentially could be related to the Switch, I don't know. The final version has entirely different bus stops that feel more like modern SpongeBob. These original bus stops are oddly big compared to the final ones too, and they can even be stood on unlike the final ones, which can be taken advantage of in several spots. Let's use the bus stop, shall we? Oh my god, it looks fucking horrible. Blatantly unfinished. That's great. No animation whatsoever. You just switch. The bus stops and the taxi pads here definitely make me feel like this build of the game was significantly earlier than PC 1.0. I feel like I'm playing an unfinished fan game or something. This is not a finished product. It's kind of insane. Let's check out the map menu again. Look at the Patrick warp. The sock has a green stripe. Why? I can't think of any reason whatsoever as to why it would have been green. Also, remember that SpongeBob closet screenshot from PC 1.0? Yeah, they just kept the one from this build, even though it didn't apply to that build. And if you're curious about SpongeBob's dream, yeah, they are still T-posing. But let's go there. What do you think's gonna happen? They're actually T-posing in the level this time. Oh my god. There's even a cutscene just blatantly showing them T-posing. How did this happen? The only explanation for it is that the game is literally not done. But now let's take a trip to Rock Bottom, because the final area of Rock Bottom has some interesting oddities. Warp to the 5th spatula. Remember the slide music bug? It's still here, of course, but there is a lot more to talk about in this area. And if you look closely, you'll notice something is off about the level layout. First of all, the tarnation spat is significantly lower. It can be easily cheesed, and you can even do it with the crusty old bus stops, which you can stand on for some reason. But now, turn around and look at that. The ending of Rock Bottom. It's just right there. It's not even like this on PC 1.0. You can literally lasso hover to it, and it doesn't even require it to be the full length. And check out these sleepy time robots. They grant you 160 shiny objects, which is a ton. On all the other patches, including PC 1.0, they only give you 70, over double the amount here. There's a cool way of grinding shinies here too. Just keep lassoing the sleepy times, and they'll keep respawning, unless you break the machine. So yeah, that's Switch 1.0. It's very bad, right? But that's not all. Let's go back to the title screen. There's more than just the SpongeBob font being used here. Let's scroll down to options and spam left in the D-pad a bit. Oh, what is that? Why is there two? Scroll down some more, spam left in the D-pad a bit more, and you'll notice the lighting is starting to change. It looks like they were testing different shaders here. Now, you probably have a keyboard laying around, right? Plug that keyboard via USB to your Switch. I'm not even kidding. And eventually, after spamming left enough, press H on the keyboard, and you'll see debug controls. Yeah, this is pretty hilarious. This was actually left in a video game you can go out and buy right now in a store. Unfortunately, I have not been able to find a way you can bring the debug stuff into the game itself, except for the text, but I mean, honestly, I don't doubt at all that there is a way. It just has yet to be found. I mean, think about how ridiculous this setup already is. There's got to be more remnants of debug stuff in here. And yeah, those are two of the 1.0 versions of SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrate, the Switch one being the earliest public build of the game. Ultimately, you were never meant to know about these versions. They were never meant to be seen. They were never meant to be played. But if you just so happened to buy this game and you didn't have internet, you still could play it, albeit an incredibly scuffed and unfinished version, but it was there. This was cool to look into though, but it really speaks volumes about how rushed this game was. As mentioned, the Switch version's 1.0 is most definitely the earliest 1.0 out of all the main platforms, and likely the earliest build of the game we'll ever have access to. There are absolutely tons and tons of other small differences here, but the ones covered here were some of the biggest. As someone who has played the actual versions of Rehydrate extensively, it has been very fascinating to me to take a look at these patches. Knowing how things are supposed to be, it really gives you some insight onto what the developers may have been thinking during the time of creating the game. I honestly feel like there was a lot of tension and pressure behind the scenes. This game absolutely does not showcase Purple Lame's full potential as a development studio, which is kinda sad because this was their big debut. Let's be real. They have been able able to prove themselves with time though. The Cosmic Shake is significantly more polished, and the Epic Mickey remake appears to be very well done. Though, despite all this, as someone who loves Battle for Bikini Bottom in general, it does make me kinda sad that the remake could have been a lot better if they were just given the time. At the end of the day though, as a speedrunner of the game, I likely have well over 1,000 hours on it, maybe even more. So I think it served its purpose, well for me at least. Rehydrate is still quite good for what it is. I don't want to discourage anyone from playing it, because it still really is Battle for Bikini Bottom, and it's still great for a casual playthrough. Just make sure you're playing the latest patch, please.